Join me as I take on the challenge of exploring Thailand's worst tourist traps and see if I can survive the experience without losing my mind. When it comes to traveling in Thailand, most of us have heard the horror stories about scams, overpriced attractions, and generally just being taken for a ride. And it's true, tourist traps are a real thing in Thailand, and they can really put a damper on your trip. But the good news is that with a little knowledge and preparation, you can avoid these traps and have an amazing time in this beautiful country. The thing is, Thailand is a country that's full of surprises, and not always in a good way. From being lied to by tuk-tuk drivers to being ripped off by overpriced street food, there are plenty of ways for unsuspecting tourists to get taken advantage of. But it's not all doom and gloom. With a little bit of insider knowledge, you can navigate the tourist traps and have a blast in Thailand. So in this video, we're going to explore the worst tourist traps in Thailand, and I'm going to give you the lowdown on how to avoid them. From overhyped attractions to scams that'll leave you feeling frustrated and ripped off, we're going to cover it all. So if you're planning a trip to Thailand anytime soon, you're going to want to stick around for this. Tourists often get caught up in the excitement of traveling to a new country, and Thailand is no exception. We get caught up in the sights, the sounds, and the excitement of exploring a new place, and sometimes we let our guard down. We trust everyone, we hand over our money without doing our research, and we get taken advantage of. But it doesn't have to be that way. One of the biggest tourists face when traveling in Thailand is navigating the language barrier. Not everyone speaks English, and even when they do, they might not be telling you the whole truth. So how do you know if someone is trying to scam you, or if they're genuinely trying to help? It's tough, but it's not impossible. When it comes to scams, Thailand has its fair share. From the classic, "this temple is closed" scam, to the more elaborate gemstone scam. There are plenty of ways for tourists to get ripped off. And it's not just scams, sometimes it's just plain old-fashioned overpricing. The thing is, Thailand is a country that's full of possibilities, and sometimes that means that tourists get taken advantage of. Whether it's being overcharged for a taxi ride or being sold fake goods on the street, there are plenty of ways for unsuspecting tourists to lose their money. So how do you avoid getting scammed in Thailand? It's all about being prepared. Do your research, know what to expect, and always keep your wits about you. If something seems too good to be true, it probably is. When it comes to tourist traps, Thailand has its fair share. From overhyped attractions to scams that'll leave you feeling frustrated and ripped off, there are plenty of ways for tourists to get taken advantage of. One of the biggest tourist traps in Thailand is the floating markets. Now, I know what you're thinking. The floating markets are supposed to be one of the highlights of any trip to Thailand. And they can be, but only if you know what you're getting yourself into. The thing is, the floating markets are a total tourist trap. They're overpriced, they're overcrowded, and they're just not that authentic. Sure, you might get some cool Instagram photos out of it, but at the end of the day, it's just not worth it. Another tourist trap to avoid is the Grand Palace in Bangkok. Now, I know what you're thinking. The Grand Palace is supposed to be one of the most impressive attractions in Bangkok. And it is, but only if you're willing to deal with the crowds and the heat. The thing is, the Grand Palace is a total nightmare. The lines are long, the sun is blazing, and the crowds are intense. And when you finally get inside, it's just not that impressive. So unless you're really into temples and architecture, it's probably not worth the hassle. But it's not all bad news. There are plenty of amazing alternatives to these tourist traps. For example, instead of visiting the floating markets, you could try visiting one of the many local markets in Bangkok. They're cheaper, they're more authentic, and they're just a lot more fun. Or instead of visiting the Grand Palace, you could try visiting the Wat Prakow complex. It's smaller, it's less crowded, and it's just a lot more impressive. One of the most notorious tourist traps in Thailand is the whole "you must buy a suit from this tailor" scam. Now, I know what you're thinking. What's the big deal about buying a suit from a tailor? Well, the thing is, these tailors are not what they seem. They'll promise you the world. A custom-made suit for a fraction of the price, guaranteed quality, the works. But what they won't tell you is that the suit is actually made in a sweatshop. It's not made from high-quality materials, and it's just not worth the money. So how can you avoid getting scammed by these tailors? It's all about doing your research. Read reviews, ask around, and always get a second opinion. If it seems too good to be true, it probably is. But it's not all scams and tourist traps. Sometimes it's just about having a bad experience. For example, I once visited the damnone Sarawak floating markets in Ratchaburi province, and it was just a total disaster. The heat was unbearable, the crowds were intense, and the vendors were just too aggressive. It was one of those experiences that made me wonder why I even bothered. But the thing is, it's all about perspective. If you go into it with the right mindset, you can still have a good time. You just have to be prepared for the chaos. So what's the worst tourist trap in Thailand? In my opinion, it's got to be the Khao Sok National Park Elephant Sanctuary. Now, I know what you're thinking. What's wrong with an elephant sanctuary? Well, the thing is, this sanctuary is not what it seems. The elephants are mistreated, the guides are untrained, and the whole thing is just a total scam. They'll promise you a chance to interact with the elephants, to feed them, to bathe them, and to learn all about them. But what they won't tell you is that the elephants are actually being abused, and that you're supporting a whole industry of animal cruelty. So how can you avoid supporting this kind of thing? It's all about doing your research. Look for sanctuaries that are accredited by reputable organizations, read reviews, and ask around. If something seems off, it probably is. In conclusion, Thailand is a country that's full of surprises, and not always in a good way. From scams to overpriced attractions, to just plain old-fashioned tourist traps, there are plenty of ways for unsuspecting tourists to get taken advantage of. But it doesn't have to be that way. By doing your research, knowing what to expect, and always keeping your wits about you, you can avoid these tourist traps and have an amazing time in Thailand. So don't let the scams and the tourist traps put you off. Thailand is an amazing country, and it's definitely worth a visit. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to share your own experiences with tourist traps in the comments below. If you liked this video, be sure to subscribe for more travel tips and tricks, and watch my next video on the hidden gems of Thailand.